there is someone that is being questioned by investigators right now in Altoona, Pennsylvania. This person is 26 years old, according to sources telling John Miller. We've learned that they actually got a tip from someone at a nearby McDonald's in that area who said, hey, this guy looks like the person that's in all those photos that have been circulating. And that's how he was brought in for further questioning. And in doing so, according to sources telling John, that they found a lot of evidence that could point in the right investigation for authorities at this point.
This Ivy League student, Luigi Mangione, is something that I think that a lot of people need to pay attention to, and I think something that you could also help elucidate for us and help to explain. So this guy, he was found, and again, suspect, person of interest, all that. The fact that he had this manifesto saying these parasites, someone had to do something about them. The fact that this is an Ivy League student. So, let's say it's shaping up to be, and I'm just going to say it, this is shaping up to be a left-wing domestic terrorist assassination on the streets of New York City. Kenny, do you think that I'm right in calling it that? I had my suspicions last week. Now we've got more evidence. Does that seem what it's like to you? And what does that mean for where the left is?
Yeah, it's definitely what it means like to me, Jack. I mean, I think I saw Elon Musk tweet today that academia is the offset of the culture that the Marxist left and the cultural Marxist of our current progressive political culture have caused. And I think this is an offset of that. When they're being told that corporations are evil, they're being told that, capitalism and venture capitalism, all those that are on Wall Street are their enemies and they want to kill their grandparents, want to kill their parents, they want to deny them health care at every single opportunity. I think that this is a great example of the offset. This guy was Ivy League educated, I believe, if we're getting all the details correct. He was a grad student at an Ivy League college. I'm not sure which college that is as of yet. So you may have already said it, but these colleges and these universities are employed 132 or 130 to 1 liberal to conservative because they're being taught a mindset that they're all victims, whether that's of academia, whether that's of social aspects, whether that's in culture, Democrats versus Republicans, whatever, that they're all victims. And I think that this violent rhetoric that so many professors in academia have been teaching has led to this. And it's a big issue at the university level. And I think that you're seeing now that there is, that shift of Republicans that ended up voting for Donald Trump of the young age of those 18 to 25. It isn't the case anymore that the universities are matching the student equivalency, right? Like that these new students are liberal, so they need to have liberal professors, and that's changed over the last few years. Now we need to kind of even the playing field, because when violent rhetoric like this is taught at these universities, I think that needs to be called out. And I'm glad people like Elon Musk and others are calling it out, because this is the result. This violent rhetoric, this indoctrination at the post-secondary education level is the reason a lot of this stuff is happening in our country. We've seen the indoctrination of people like Audrey Hale in the Nashville Manifesto shooting, and now we have this of the United Health CEO getting killed because of the rhetoric that he's likely being taught at the universities and by the culture around him. So we need to be willing to call it out, willing to be calling out how indoctrination has led to these things, because if we do not call that out, more things like this are going to happen.
No, I think that's exactly right. I do think that the indoctrination, and keep in mind that we're still in the fog of crime around this as at the moment, but it appears, looking at the dates of his time as a student at the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, one of the best schools in the nation in terms of its prestige and in terms of just, getting hard to get in there, that low admission rate, that he was there during 2020. So he was there during the peak woke, as you would call it. He was someone who was there during the time for all that rhetoric, for that color revolution that was run in the United States. And look, I sat and wrote a book earlier this year with Joshua Lysek explaining that this is what was going to come. And we specifically talked about spoiled rich kids with their prestige who are very bored, who are running around and believe that they're the masters of the universe and they're the ones. And you had movies like this one. We talked about it on Thought Crime the other night with myself and Blake Neff, that the movie Parasite in 2019, which also came out around that time, totally focused on these ideas that the rich are evil just because they are rich. And that movie won the Academy Award. It won a ton of Academy Awards. And it was promoted, despite the fact that, quote unquote, killing the rich, or as they like to say, eating the rich, eat the rich, was the major theme of the book. And then here you are just a couple of days later, and we find that his manifesto had the phrase parasite in it to begin with. And so, Kenny, let me ask you this question, and this is a tough question. So just because we don't support the devolution of social order with street assassinations, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to sit here and defend everything an insurance company does or everything that Obamacare does, right?
I mean, I think it's a complicated question. I think it's a pretty easy question. I mean, Republicans have been very pro-working class. They've worked, like with the Teamsters, with the Secretary of Labor. Chavez has been one of the most, pro-working class, working people, getting the same kind of rhetoric, calling out these corporations for doing things like I'm sure this guy had complaints about. But we're not advocating for the death of CEOs just because we want negotiations to happen, just because we, want to fight for the working class in this country. We're not going to, promote violent rhetoric like Taylor Lorenz from the Washington Post does. I mean, we're not going to call for the assassination of CEOs. We're not going to call for violent rhetoric. We're just going to say, hey, be human. You know what I mean? Like, be human. And I'm sure that there are some shared, there are some shared ideologies between this exploitation of violent rhetoric that they're encouraged to be violent. It's not a debate about ideas or a battle of ideas. These people, it's the promotion of violence. It's the promotion of assassinations. I mean, we saw it with Donald Trump this year. Not that he's the one that's been willing to go out to the libertarians, to the Teamsters, to the Bitcoin advocates and have conversations with them. But when the left wants to have conversations about this, they solve it with violence. And that's what's being taught at the post-secondary education level. And I don't really understand why more people are not willing to call it out. When we've seen these studies, again, done by universities themselves of those who identify as Democratic or Republican, when it's 132-1 at Ivy League schools and universities across this country, and we've had a few killers now that have been college educated and have been taught these things. And this guy's been reading the Unabomber. I mean, how are we not questioning a little bit about how, this rhetoric that's been promulgated by these assassins, these violent people who have shot Congress members, who have sent anthrax to Congress members, who have attempted to assassinate the president, and now assassinated the United Health CEO. Why are we not asking the questions about what's happening at the university levels in this country? We need to be willing to have conversations about the indoctrination levels at that level, because I think far too often, even on the conservative side, we're all oftentimes concentrated on what's happening to young minds in K through 12, but we also need to have a concentration on what's happening after high school and after public school. We need to be willing to have the conversations of what's happening in the classrooms in the universities around this country, because if this keeps happening, our young people are not going to want to go to college at all. And like I said, maybe that's a good thing. But if for those that are going, they don't need to be indoctrinated to the point where they're drove absolutely insane, to the point where they're literally killing corporation CEOs in this country and are being told that they are victims and that they need to fight back against the man. We can have conversations about the elite and have the debates about how to crush down the elite in this country, and have conversations about anti-elitism in this country without having violent rhetoric. Like you said, we're not defending insurance CEOs, but we're also not advocating for them to be killed. We're just advocating for the working man to be promoted in this country. And that's the conversation we need to be willing to have, not these violent attacks and assassinations on the people who just disagree with us. And that's what the left is promoting, is violence and assassination over simple debate and discourse.